Hey friends, it's Mel, your Stroke Fitness registered dietitian. Today in class, we talked about the things you can and cannot say as a nutrition coach, what is helpful, what is unhelpful in the context of how you support your clients as it relates to nutrition, and this idea that just because we can, should we? So if you have any questions or thoughts on this topic, this is the class to tune into.
I was hoping that we could start out by addressing a trainer in Sacramento. And this is scary because this is very, very common. And he was asking me about, because I'm gonna have him on our podcast, because he has 6 weeks it took him to be the #1 trainer at that gym. So it's really neat to see what the product of being a great trainer produces. And that's exactly Joe. And then he was asking me about how to optimize his current book of business and what he can and cannot talk about with nutrition. And he said, got 2 guys. I responded. I was thinking I'm going to charge him $250 for the programming, if that's a good pricing for the program, and then the meal plan. And I said, no, don't get into meal plans. That's not in your capacity. And that's why you got to get into the calls and ask Mel, because we got to stay in our lane. And he's like, oh, I didn't know that, because everyone else here does that.
Talked about, you probably want to have a physical therapy within your referral system network. So yeah, visceral reactions are, just because you can, should you? So as Chris expressed, it is not within your scope of practice to write meal plans. I would advise against it. We all know that there are people doing it. It's more a matter of when you get caught or when someone reports it, that will get you in trouble. So it's not something you're ever going to hear me tell you that you should be doing. The things that you are capable and are within your scope of practice to advise on are general nutrition education recommendations. So that doesn't mean prescribing, that doesn't mean specific macros, all of that is prescriptive in nature. And that's why you would want to have a dietitian on your team within your network that you can collaborate, because it can come from them and you can positively reinforce it and educate and support and make suggestions around that. But the actual prescription itself, if you are utilizing macros, for example, I would utilize a registered dietitian, and that is whatever state you are in. If you watch the first case study, because I know some people did, every time you watch a case study of mine, I'm going to show you a map, and it'll talk about the different states and what is protected in terms of what you can call yourself, what you can't call yourself. But all that's talking about is the name protection. So I wonder, Chris, if DPT, if that the acronym is probably not protected. Someone can call themselves a master of movement, but what does that mean? Nothing. So we can say doctor of physical therapy, that title might be protected, but DPT in of itself might not. So yeah, it's tricky marketing, even within the industry.
Scary, very scary. And Shannon's asking about showing examples of meal plans. What are your thoughts on that? Here's what a balanced 40 meal plan would look for someone that eats meat, for instance.
Well, and I guess, if you want to speak up and kind of share where this is coming from, where's the example meal plan coming from? I would caution you against comparing your body and what you're doing to what your client is doing. I think it's one thing if they're asking you for examples of different high protein meals. So you can absolutely talk about, hey, here are some sources of foods that are equal to 30 grams of protein, 40 grams of protein, 50 grams of protein. Here's an example of different ways that you can get that into your diet. Or you want to increase your protein, great. Instead of 2 eggs, have 3, or have a cup of whites and 2 whole eggs. So you can still get a lot of the other micronutrients that come from the yolk. So you can give those suggestions, but I would caution a sample meal plan, because what you're doing, or the example you get from the internet or Precision Nutrition or whatever that is, because we can all look up and find sample examples of 15 to 2,500 calories. Does that directly apply to your client? And what is the impact of that? Do they then expect that they need to eat 3 meals and 2 snacks? Or does that mean that they need to fast for 12 hours in order for them to do a good job? So I even think a sample meal plan actually does no good when you're talking about individual clients. But what would be helpful and advantageous is, again, what is the behavior? What is the habit that you see that they're expressing to you that they need help with? And you can absolutely direct them in how that can be more supported.
Yeah, that's kind of what I mean. Usually the questions that I get are like, how is it even possible to eat over 100 grams of protein? And so then I'll go into like, okay, well, if you eat, if we're assuming that you're just omnivorous, then you would do like eggs and maybe an additional protein for breakfast, a snack like a Greek yogurt, something with a protein for lunch, and then something with a protein for dinner. You know what I mean? Like giving an example of foods, like, is that still overstepping, I guess?
No, I think that would be totally appropriate. Yeah. I was imagining more, and that's why, and I totally appreciate you popping in and asking the question, because I'm inferring what I'm reading, like, oh, you're going to show them this like hard copy. And we'll probably do this at some point. I know Chris and I have done it in another class where we pulled up like problematic examples of trainers who have like done meal plans or marketed, cookie cutter type situations. But that's what I would veer away from. So